And let's hope we have a meaningful evening together. The emes is a terech be'erev Shabbos is oichel b'Shabbos. You work hard erev Shabbos. You eat on Shabbos. Doesn't just mean the food. It means ruchnias. It means a whole approach to Yontif. This is begeda terech be'erev Shabbos. This is it. And if we want to eat the peiros of our families having a geschmack Yontif together, so we have to be terech be'erev Shabbos. This is begeda terech be'erev Shabbos. We've got to put thought into, and not just fly with it and hope for the best, but put thought into the sugya of connecting our kids to a meaningful Shabbos or a meaningful Yontif. For us, Yontif, for most of us, Yontif is a gewaldige time. It's uplifting, it's meaningful, it's a time to reconnect, to restart. It's a time of special relationship with Kudsha Bricha, and we look at it with trepidation. It's true, we're scared. It's the days of awe. It's awesome, it's frightening. But for us, it's also uplifting, it's meaningful, it's special, it's geschmack. It's also a time of tremendous stress. The stress, pashat, the energy-related stress. The energy, just pashat, the kaichas, to be able to relate to the tefillahs and the slichas and getting up early, the davening, the tanesim that will come our way, the cooking. Let's not forget about all the food preparation and the cooking. It's enormous energy-related stress. In addition to that, there's the financial stress. Right? No one, rarely comes to Yontif with enough money. Between the food and all the clothing, and then comes all the mitzvahs that we want to be involved in, behida. It's a tremendously stressful time. So on the one hand, we want to have this meaningful relationship where we can reconnect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And at the same time, we have to juggle the realities of life, that there's enormous stress. And the worst stress of all is none of the stuff we've talked about. It's the stress with the kids. That's the hardest stress. Because really we want them to experience what we have, what we experience with our looking forward, the dveikus and the simcha, and albeit it's hard work and it's costly, but we want that relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there's nothing we want more for our children than they should have that relationship too. This is the goal of our lives, their Yiddish home. The stress related to trying to connect our children in a healthy way for many homes is absolutely the worst stress of all. Will they go to the davening? Will they get up for davening? When will they get up for davening? Did they hear Tekiyos? They did? They didn't? What happened? Are they shaykh to the whole sugya? Are they there by the sudas? The stress to find a way to connect the children in a way, because that's a family. That's what we do. We have children, and we want to reconnect them. We want to connect them to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in the effort to connect them, we can often make a mistake of disconnecting them, because we have so much energy and so much attention and so much focus, we can do the exact wrong thing and disconnect them. So what I want to talk tonight is really three things. The goal of it is that we should have a wonderful Yontif as a family, each of us. We should work out how to have a family experience that's meaningful and connects us all to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the goal of the evening. And there are three sets of comments I would like to share, to talk about, to bring us to that understanding. The first is going to be about our role, my role as a parent, as a Jew. What is my role? Who am I? What is my obligation, klape shmaya? What should I be thinking about as I approach this tekufa of the year? The second section will be about understanding our children in a way that we can have compassion, true compassion for them, and not be so uptight with them, but have compassion and understanding of where they're holding and understand their journey. And the third section, in Mitzvah Hashem, we will give practical advice and go through some of the practical issues that will make sense, hopefully, if I understand what's my role and I understand my children better. So it will make a lot more sense when we come to the practical advice of what should we actually be doing and how do we actually engage them in a way that's healthy. Let's start with a story. To me, it's one of my favorite stories of all time. And it's the story they say over, it's a famous story. If you heard it before, enjoy it again, because it's such a geschmack story. And it's a story after the war that occurred in Borough Park in the USA. And the story was with the Baba V'Rav, Shlomo Halberstam, Zecher Tzadik V'Kodesh L'Vracha. An amazing story. It seems the Rav, very few of his Hasidim survived the war, and he had a small group he got together after the war. The Baba V'Chassidim, today they're a massive, gigantic organization. But then after the war, it was a very small group survived. And it seems one Shabbos, the Baba V'Rav was walking to Beis HaMedrash Shabbos morning with his son Reb Naftali, who that later became the Rav. And on the way, he went past a park bench and saw sitting on this bench a Yid, a Tzabrachan Yid, Shabbos morning, no yarmulke, smoking a cigarette on Shabbos morning. And the Rav stopped and engaged him. And he said to him, good Shabbos, how are you? And they spoke. And the Yid groaned back to him. And the Rav said to him, maybe you'll come and daven with us. And he said, no, I'm done with that. I'm finished with that. No, not interested. And the Rav spoke to him and tried to schmooze with him. And b'toich the dibur, the conversation, he discovered this Yid was once a chazan in Europe before the war. And the Rav said, no, I've got a great idea. We don't have a chazan in our Beis HaMedrash. Maybe you'll come be the chazan in our Beis HaMedrash. We need a chazan. The Yid is sitting there smoking with no yarmulke, Shabbos morning. And he declined, and the Rav went on his way. Next week they came back, on the way to shul. The Yid sitting there smoking, no yarmulke on the bench. And again the Rav engaged him. Maybe you'll come daven with us. I told you we need a chazan. Maybe you'll come be a chazan by us. And again he declined. As they went to shul, his son, Rabbi Naftali, who later became the Rav, turned to him and said, Tati, he's a Machal Shabbos b'Fahesia. He should be the chazan in our shul. And the Rav turned to him and said, Shem Yirachah, how can you say such a thing? That Yid is not smoking. Hitler, Imach Shemai, he's smoking. That Yid's not smoking. That's a tired Yid. He should be the chazan now, Beis HaMedrash. And they went on their way. Third week came by. Again, they come past the Yid. And again, he invited him to be a chazan. And again, he declined. And again, Rav Tali said to him, Tati, sof, he's Machal Shabbat. He said, Chas v'shalom. That Yid is not smoking. The Gestapo, Machshmam, they're smoking. That Yid is not smoking. The story continues that the Rav eventually was mashpia on this Yid to come to his Beis HaMedrash and become the chazan in his Beis HaMedrash. Years later, decades later, he left the Beis HaMedrash, he moved somewhere else. Many decades later, the Rav got an invitation to be Mesader Kedushin for an Einikel, a grandson of this Yid. He declined, but he came to the Sheva Brachas. And when he walked into the Sheva Brachas, he was greeted by no less 100 Einiklach, 100 grandchildren, who went over to the Rav and said, you're our grandfather. Because you saw the truth in our grandfather. You saw him. You saw it wasn't him smoking. It wasn't him being Mechal Shabbos. The Nazis are Machshmam. That's who was smoking. And you saw that. And you brought him back. When I was here last time, we discussed the 4 S's. You remember the 4 S's of attachment? Safe, secure, seen, and soothed. The way we should attach our children to us and to Rabbeinu Shalom. Can any one of us say, authentically, I know for sure I gave my children all 4, safe, secure, seen, and soothed. I did it. Can anyone say that? Can anyone say that the community my kids grew up in, the schools they went to, the shuls they went to, the environment they lived in, gave them safe, secure, seen, and soothed. Can anyone say that? No. So when your kid is struggling, when you see them doing things that perhaps, why are they doing that? That inappropriate behavior. I will say to you, it is not that child who's doing that behavior. It's the trauma, it's the struggles, it's the detachment, it's the lack of safe, secure, seen, and soothed. That's who's being Mechal Shabbos. That's who's struggling with the mitzvahs. But this kid, this is a Kaddish V'Tahar, no less than the Baba V'Rav saw. Our role as parents is to bring this truth to our children. They have to see in our eyes that when we look at them and we look at their behavior, what they see is, I see a Kaddish V'Tahar who may be struggling, I got it, who may have a hard time with this mitzvah. I have amazing, and no time now, stories of children I worked with over the years who, Pashat, when I first saw them, they Pashat scared me. Tattoos and earrings and who knows what. They Pashat scared me when I first saw them, and they came to my office. Turned out the same kid that frightened me at the door. Hi, what's your name? Hi, I'm Shmuel. Like sweet kids inside. But no one ever reflected it back to them properly. That's our primary job. What's our job as a Jew? What's our job for the Yomim Tovim? What's the tachlis of Yomim Tovim? What is the whole tachlis of Yomim Tovim? If not, Dov Kabay. If not, what is tshuva for? What are we being shoved to? We're doing tshuva, right? The whole tkufa of tshuva. Tzlichas and tfilas and tkiyas and tanesim. It's all about tshuva, right? It's all about coming back to Rabbeinu Shalom. What does that mean, coming back? It means to the mitzvah, the primary mitzvah of Dov Kabay, which is the tachlis of Kol HaTorah Kulai. The whole tachlis is this mitzvah of Dov Kabay, that we should reconnect to Rabbeinu Shalom. We should have an authentic relationship with Rabbeinu Shalom. So what is our job as a parent, as a Jew in this tkufa for our children? If not, that we should be the ones to show them their connection to Kudsha Brichu. To show them that I see an authentic Jew. I see through the lack, of this problem, the sneers, or the davening, or the getting up late, or whatever your problems are. Not the being not tuned into the whole sugya, running away from the meals, falling asleep, not getting out of bed. I see through all that. I don't see that. That's the trauma, that's the struggles, they have to know when they look in my eyes, what they see is that I see an authentic Jew. Just as Rabbeinu Shalom sees us as authentic Jews, despite, let's be honest, what do we bring back to him compared to last year's Ne'ilah commitments? What are we bringing back to him this year? Are we really proud of where we are, of all the commitments we made? And yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees the truth. And he wants us to reattach. The Baba V'Rav saw it in a Yid where he wasn't distracted by all the externals. He saw the internal. He saw the real Yid. See, parenting, what is parenting? What is the real Yisod? What is the word concept of parenting? If not to provide attachment. We want to cause, we discussed it at length last time, connecting with our children that they should feel attached to us. Why? As a Yid, why is that so important? And I contend it's so important because if a child will learn how to connect with me, their personal, private Av HaRachamon, then maybe they can transfer that experience when they mature and matriculate. They can transfer that to the Av HaRachamon. But if they don't have the dogma of an Av, an Aim, Harachamon, well, how are they going to transfer that? How are they going to trust Rabbeinu Shalom that he should? That's where they get it from. By observing our relationship to them. I've got news for you. It happens better when they defy you than when they don't. Think about it. Because when they defy you and you see through that and love them through the defiance, they know that you're seeing their essence. What does Chazal say? Al tistakel b'kankan el amasha b'soichai. Don't judge a book by its cover, which is what all our kids are craving, desperate for. That we should see their pnimius. And if we can just break through as a Jew, as a parent in this tkufa and see the pnimius, the heart and soul, and not see the Rav saw, the smoking yid on the thing, that's the Nazis, and this is trauma. This is their struggles and difficulties, but I see the real yid. They can transfer that halavai one day. It'll take years, okay. But one day, God willing, they'll transfer that to Rebbeinu Shalom. That's our job. Dov Kabbai, this mitzvah of Dov Kabbai, how do we achieve Dov Kabbai? If this is Tachlis Kolatar Kulai, is the mitzvah of Dov Kabbai, to be Dovak with Rebbeinu Shalom. So how do we do that? So the Sfarim HaKadoshim tell us very clearly, we do it through the vehicle of Mahurachum Afaturachum. We emulate Rebbeinu Shalom's midas. We analyze, understand, and internalize Rebbeinu Shalom's midas, and then we act that way to each other. Mahurachum Afaturachum. That's how you connect to Rebbeinu Shalom. It's a physical connection. It's by being medame your behavior to His. So we learn Hashem's midas. Shem Hashem kel rachum v'chanun. We have to learn to be merachim. Hashem Hashem loshen rachim kel loshen din rachum v'chanun. 2 more times rachamim. Rachamim twice, then din, then 2 more rachamims. It's always with rachamim. We have to surround everything with rachamim. So what could be better for us? Think about it. It's amazing. It's marvel, actually. Once you change your head into this new place where forget, what's better? Here's a lomdus they discuss in the Sfarim. What's better for my avodas Hashem? Utilizing my good midas to serve Rebbeinu Shalom, or overcoming my bad midas to serve Rebbeinu Shalom? Which one is actually better? Which one brings me closer to Hashem? As Pasha, any Chacham would understand that overcoming your bad midas is a starker avodah in terms of avodas Hashem than just simply using the gifts Hashem gave you, your good midas. It's Pasha like that. Well, in the same vein, when your kids are difficult, shall we say, because this drasha, let's face it, is not about what we call the APKs. You know what APKs are? Autopilot kids. Basically, they're born, you put the battery in the back, you flitch and they come right out, the best seminary, the best yeshivas, get married. I used to say in America, they go to BJJ, they go to Brisk, they end up in Lakewood, and everything's fine. That's APKs. What's all the rest? The non-APKs. That's this drasha. They're the ones you put the battery in the back, you barely switch it on, and it goes over there. And you go running like a meshugana to get it back, and you head it back this way, but it doesn't go to the middle, it goes flying off in that direction. And your entire life, you're like a sheepdog trying to get this back in the corral. It's always on its own derech. That's non-AP. That's what this is about. So I contend like this. In terms of my personal avodah, me as a parent, me as an Eved Hashem, me as a Jew, in terms of my relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this tkufa of Yomim Noraim, of my effort to be Dov Kabbai, to connect to Kadosh Baruch Hu through Mahu Rachum Afatu Rachum, where do I need more Rachamim? With a struggling kid or a less struggling kid? Where do I need to work on myself more? It's so easy to be nice and loving and easygoing when your kids are just like pouring a shefa of nachas in your direction. Right? It's just like showering you with nachas. Yeah, that's easy. Do you work more on mahurachum afatorachum when your kids are all APKs or when they're not APKs? Avada, when they're not APKs. So it comes out that the avodah of this tkufa, which results in dov kaboi, which is through mahurachim atarachim, actually is achieved more sincerely and more effectively when your kids are challenging to you. Maybe that's why Hashem made them that way. Maybe that's why Hashem gave them to us, so they can improve my midas and my character and give me a more authentic yontif. And by doing so, model to them the healthy attachments that we discussed last time, that they can then employ and utilize in their journey. One day, amidst Hashem, that they can reconnect to Hashem. This is my journey as a parent or as a Jew. This is my job in Yom Narayim, is to realize that, as we once said, and I'll say it for the rest of my life, probably in every drush I ever give, your problems are not in your way. Your problems are your way. The problems presented to me is the very way I connect with Rabbi Shimon. They're not in the way. My kids are not stopping me having this great yontif, but they're a vehicle through which I can work on myself and have what yontif is really about. The true attachments through mahurachim, afatarachim, to have a really truly spiritual experience and model that for my children. That's my role as a parent, as a Jew in this tekufa. Let's see if we can understand. You know what? One more comment first. How does Mesorah actually work? Yeah, we want to pass Mesorah to our children. We have a job as a parent to pass Mesorah, to give this over to our children. So interestingly enough, Mesorah does not happen through demanding, through pressuring, through preaching, long drashas, instructions, criticism, negativity, punishments, even bribing and rewards. That's not how Mesorah happens. Fascinatingly enough, if we could do the research, I could show it to you, that actually Mesorah comes through osmosis. It happens. True Mesorah comes because your kids feel attached to you and they want to be part of your life in the future. They imagine unconsciously sitting in your sukkah when they get married with their wife and their kids. They imagine coming to your Shabbos table. They imagine you going to their simchas. They want to be part of your life because they feel attached to you. Through that attachment, through that relationship, pours out Mesorah. That's how it happens. It happens on its own. It doesn't happen by drushes, by threats, by criticism. No, it doesn't happen that way anymore. I'm not sure if it ever did, but it sicher doesn't in this generation. It happens because the children choose and want, it's an unconscious need, they want to be part of your life, part of my life. They want to be close to us. I mean, Mela, if you want to be close to me, I want to be in the same ballpark. I want to be doing things you're doing. I want us to enjoy life together. Mesorah happens because of relationship. There's a fascinating pasuk in Hazinu. Pasuk says like this. We'll learn it in 2 weeks. Pasuk says, Zecha yemei Sailam. Remember the days of old. Binu shnois dor v'dor. Understand the years of every generation. Shalavicha v'yagidcha. Ask your father, he'll tell you. Zkenecha v'yomerloch. The Zayda, ask the grandfather, he'll tell you too. And the Bali Musa and the Bali Chasidus, they talk about these Pesukim in terms of Mesorahs HaTorah, the transition of Torah. Ask your father, he'll tell you. Remember the days of old. The anchor should be the Derech Yisrael Saba, the way it always was. That's the anchor. And we should try to anchor our traditions in the traditional values of Mesorah, of Yadus. If you don't know how to do it, Shalavicha v'yagidcha, ask your father, he'll tell you. Zkenecha v'yomlach, the Zayda will tell you too. This is how they learn these Pesukim. I'd like to suggest a different pshat. All that pshat about Mesorah is in the first line, Zcha yemei Sailam. Remember the days of old. That's Mesorah. That's the anchor. That's we have to bring up our kids, in a way that was a tradition of Yadus. We don't need new ideas. Torah tells us how to bring up our kids. What's the hemshech? Binu shnois davido. Binu is lashon havdalah. Bein zeh lezeh. Binu is havana, understanding, by separation. Bein. Binu is bein. Separate between two ideas. Separate shnois, the shinuyim, dor v'dor of every generation. Understand that generations are different. There's a natural Yeridus Hadairis, but there's also changes in every generation. The music one generation grows up with, to the next generation is like old-fashioned. They don't want to listen to that stuff. They have a whole new type of beat and music. They're from 3 generations ago. That's like, whoa, that's like archaic. Do people really listen to that? It's like it hurts their ears. Hairstyles, clothing, everything changes. Subtle shinuyim. The chachma in parenting is to understand that we need a firm anchor in the traditions of Torah, but then you have to be a chacham, binu, understand the differences, shnois and the shinuyim, dor v'dor of every generation. Things change, subtle, small, not attacking the Messiah, but things that have nothing to do with halachic things, like styles of clothing and hair and music. These things, we have to allow for these things or we alienate our kids. They think we're old fuddy-dudders and they just don't want anything to do with us. We have to be relevant. We have to understand where they're at. This is natural. If you don't believe me, Shala vicha v'yagidcha, ask your father, he'll tell you he had the same problems bringing you up. Skeinecha, and ask your Zayda v'yomroch, and he'll tell you too he had to give up on it and he had to allow the children. There's one difference though. Shala vicha v'yagidcha. Yagidcha is a lashon hagod, is a hard lashon. It's tough. Why? Because the father's still struggling. You know how it is, a parent. You're still struggling. Yagidcha, we'll tell it to you, but it's hard. Skeinecha v'yomrulach is a soft lashon. Ask the Baba and the Zayda, they'll say, don't worry, Shefala. It's okay. Things will be okay, you'll see. It's going to work out. It's a soft lashon. Everyone knows you have to allow for subtle changes. Messiah happens by osmosis. It allows itself. It's a subtle process. We allow the shinuyim, we don't bash into them to be the same as us. The anchor is Torah. But it's through our observance of a compassionate, loving, connected Torah mitzvahs. It's that compassion that connects our kids to us and allowing them the subtle shinuyim, the little changes, frees it all to flow into them so they can grow up to be who they're going to be and fulfill their destiny and be connected. This is our first job, is to understand this as a parent, and as a Jew, this is my job. This is why I have kids. And this is my mandate. Let me address for a few moments children. See, most of us have horribly unrealistic expectations and understanding of children. For most of us, if Lu Yitzuya, they're in this group, people who actually were pretty good kids, who did kind of well and grew up and were more or less disciplined and behaved well and just grew up. I imagine there's some in this group. It wouldn't surprise me. Right? The entire group here is not the group of people who are all struggling every 2 minutes. Right? That is the hardest. It's much easier when you were that kind of parent. I always tell the teachers in school, hands up anyone who's half off the derech. They don't usually like to say it. But there's always one or two. They're usually the best teachers. The ones who were there and understood it, they're gewaldig. And for the problem we have, most of us as parents, is that we have a program in our brains that tells us how to parent based on our personal experience. Either we copy it, we mirror it, expecting this to be normal, because where else do we get the facts from? Or we reject it if we didn't like, the whole matzah, then we reject it and we do the exact opposite. But again, it's without thoughtfulness. They're both wrong. So how do we do it? We have to understand the realities of what is the truth about our children and their struggles? There's a Gemara in Nida, Tes Zayin Amud Beis. The Gemara says like this: Hamalach hamamuna al hahirayan lailishma. There's a malach in charge of pregnancy. His name is Laila. Noitel tipa mamida lifnei makom. He takes a drop of embryonic fluid from the pregnant mother, places it before the Rabbeinu Shalom, and he says, Tipa zumati alea. What's going to be? How's he going to grow up? Hacham or tipish? Will he be smart or stupid? Gibber or cholash? Strong or weak? Osher or oni? Wealthy or poor? Ve'ilu tzadik v'rosh aloi tema. He doesn't ask if he's going to be a tzadik or rosh. Okay, a kol b'dei shemayim chutz b'Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is a person's own work. But the rest, and I believe those are the three dimensions we live in. Hacham or tipish is your internal intellectual functioning. Gibber or cholosh is your physical body, strong or weak. Osher or oni is the environment you live in. You're wealthy or poor. It's the circumstances of your life. I think it really means the three dimensions in which we live our lives. And it's kol b'dei shemayim. What does it mean, a kol b'dei shemayim? Listen to this. Zog Rashi. Rashi tells us what's kol b'dei shemayim. He says, Kol midaisov v'karaisav shel adam boin loy b'gezeres melech. Every person born, their midas, character and personality, v'karaisav, and the events that happen to them and may hurt them on the way, the traumatic events, the hurtful experiences of abuse, the meeting the wrong neighbor who seems to slap them in the wrong direction, Karoisov, the events that happen to them, and all their midas is all min hashemayim. That's all min hashemayim. Hakol kol midaisov. This is not Mishpacha magazine. This is Rashi. Kol midaisov v'karoisov shel adam bain lo b'gzeres melech. It's all min hashemayim. Technically speaking, if you get upset with your kid one day because your kid is just lazy, and you can't stand it, they don't help, and you need so much help. Take the garbage out, help with the dishes, do something. And the kid's sitting there, whatever they're doing, playing one game or another. And you go over and say, you're so selfish and so lazy. What's wrong with you? So technically, if they saw this Gemara, and it's true, they should say, I'm so sorry. I was min hashemayim. It's Ayin Rashi, Tes Zayin in Nida. I mean, Kol midosav v'karosav, b'olam b'gzeres melech. I didn't ask for this. Actually, I'm your nisoyan. I'm your nisoyan. I'm good for you. I'm really good for you. That's why God gave me. By the way, God trusted you to be compassionate to me and help me. I'm born with this stupid ADD. You think I asked for it? You think I like having an impulse disorder? I'm your nisoyan. I'm the best thing for you. That's what they should really say. Not sure how well we would react if they did. Oh, but it's a Rashi, it's a Gemara. If it's true, if it's sheker, then we're chayev. If you're going to yell at your kid, you're so lazy, and it's not true, then you're chayev. You're a mazik. You just wrecked your kid. If it is true, they're your nisoyan. How does yelling at them help them? You should go over and say, Shefala, you're lazy, but it's not your fault. And if you feel in the mood of helping, I'd appreciate it. But if you're not, that's fine. It's fine, because you're lazy. It's your thing. You want to overcome it, I'll be glad to help you overcome it. But if you're not in the mood for overcoming laziness today, that's fine. This is your nisoyan. And they say, okay, fine. They should activate in us their variety of midas level disabilities, should activate in us the mahurachum afatarachum. It's a synergy. It works together. God gave it to us so we all grow. We all get better. But everyone's problems, their midas, their character, their personality, and the things that happen to them is all gezeres melech. I have a million rayos for this, but this will do for now. We have to be compassionate to that. You can't get upset with your kid. Why are you what's the matter with you? Why are you so selfish? Why are you so selfish? I don't know. Go ask God. He made me this way. It's me. I'm selfish. What can I do? Can you help me? Do you mind? I really appreciate it. We have to understand our children, and we have to see. It's like Rabbi Shlomo Baba said, it's not the Yid that smokes, it's the Nazi who's smoking. This is a good kid. This is a good kid. He happens to have ADD. That's his nisayon. Be impulsive, or selfish, or lazy, or anything else. Disrespectful. That's their nisayon. They're my job. That's my job to help them. We have to be realistic about our children and not expect like they should all be these perfect. No one's perfect. No one's born perfect. No one is perfect. No one leaves the world perfect. It's the process of life. And when better during this stressful Yom Noraim to remind ourselves of this truth so that we can approach our kids with compassion and they can feel our sensitivity towards them. Halavai, halavai, halavai. There's a Chasam Sofer, an amazing, amazing Chasam Sofer, on a pasuk in Koheles. The pasuk says like this: Eilecha eretz shemalkecha nar v'sorecha b'boki yochelu. I'll translate it. Eilecha eretz, oy vey for the country, shemalkecha nar, whose king is a child, v'sorecha, and the ministers, b'boki yochelu, eat breakfast. I'm just translating literally. A very strange pasuk. What is the pshat in this pasuk? It's the Chasam Sofer. Let me see if I can read it to you, if I have it. Yeah. So the Chasam Sofer says a fantastic thing on this pasuk. He says like this. You know what? Let me just say it out so I'll explain to you. Well, let me explain. He says, Oy vey for the country whose king is a nar. Oy vey goes on the second part, whose ministers eat breakfast. It means like this: Oy vey, if a country's king is young, oy vey, because the ministers eat breakfast. We'll see what it means. And he explains like this. It's impossible that it's oy vey if a king is a nar, because Shlomo HaMelech was the king at 14, and he was a great bracha for Klal Yisrael. So you can't say oy vey for a country whose king is a nar, because he himself was a nar at 14, and it was a wonderful thing for the country. So it's impossible to say that. It must be oy vey if the king is a nar, because the ministers eat breakfast. What does it really mean? It means like this. He says, impossible that a child will not be childish. You ever imagine saying to a child, you got a child, and you say to him, you're such a nar. You're behaving with such narishkeit. You know what the kid should say? You say, yeah, I mean, technically I'm a nar. That's right. And a nar should act with nar-ishkeit, because I'm a nar. Zog the Chasam Sofer. It's impossible for a child not to be childish. It's impossible for a nar not to act sometimes narish, with narishkeit. That's the nature of a child. It's impossible for them not to behave that way. He said, what's the job if a king becomes a king when he's young, 14, a young kid, he's not mature yet? What's the job of his ministers? B'boker shalai, in his youth, not when they eat breakfast. It means b'boker, in his early childhood. What's their job? Their job is to cover up, he says. Put a band-aid over their michshalim. He's sitting there with the crown, on the big, he's on the thing, he's 14, and he's like throwing the scepter up in the air, and he's playing with the crown on the scepter. You've got to shield the world from this childish behavior of the king. That's their job. Protect him until he can grow up and behave healthy. You have to cover up. You have to shield him and protect him. Says the Chasam Sofer, oy vey for a country where the king became a king at a young age, and he says, V'sarecha b'boika yochelu, they ate him up. They bit him. They criticized him when he was a child. Can't you act like a king? What's the matter with you? Behave like a king. You're a king now. You have to be kingly. And they start yelling at him and screaming at him to behave like a king. Zog the Chasam Sofer, long before he ever will become a fully matured king, he says, Yavesh Ruchai, he will be dried out. His spirit will be wrecked inside. He'll walk around feeling like a dead person. He'll never become the king he's meant to be, because he will have been criticized and blamed and knocked for his narishkeit, when in fact it is nature of a nar to act with narishkeit. We have to take mussar and respect the fact that our children are a work in progress. Even the researchers today who talk about brain development say and argue that brain development is not finished till 24. 24. And here at 14, where it's 10 years early, we're expecting this kid to behave. Sit up straight, you're bar mitzvah now. You gotta go, you gotta get up. Torah says you can't get chorus till the end of 19th year, because the Eibishter understands a person's a work in progress. We're in such a rush that we want our kids to give us nachas, and they have to be perfect, so we're pushing and pushing. They're not there yet. And in fact, I'll tell you something else. In this day and age, there's a lot of research that connects, university research, that connects maturity to age life expectancy. And it's been done time and time again to show that as life expectancy is getting older, people are living older, maturity is lagging. You know, many, many years ago, I remember they used to talk about girls going to seminary in America, girls from America coming here to seminary after high school. It's like finishing, you know, it was the finishing year. Polish them off, get them ripe for marriage. You know, it's like a maturing, final maturing. Today, the nusach for most of them is my year off. The girls look at it, it's my year off, leave me alone. And the whole thing is, how do I get like a really frum but non-academic seminary? I don't want to learn anymore, you know, if I can avoid it. Ashkafa, give me ashkafa. You know, I used to teach in seminary. It was fascinating. The 7 years I taught, I noticed between the beginning and end, how at the beginning you could do a text. You could actually read a text, and they would actually follow inside with their eyes and a finger. And 7 years later, I would start a text and everyone fell asleep. They're like, it's like a shut, it's like you gave them some sleeping aid. Just by reading a text, everyone falls asleep. Maturity is delayed, which makes perfect sense, by the way, the research, with age expectancy. A child has to be a nar. They have to be a child. They need to be childish. It is our job, slowly but surely, to help them mature. And that maturity is a long, long process. But in our rush to get them matured early, Yavesh Ruchai, says the Chasam Sofer, we can actually dry them out. So they'll never get there. They'll never be in a place where they're interested anymore, because they got so turned off. They got so dried out by unrealistic expectations that were just not appropriate for where their age and maturity level was. So they were doing it because they were forced to, until they don't anymore, because they don't want it, because they hate it. Our job is to let them be childish. Let them be patient. Be a role model. Connect with them. Do the mahu rachum afata rachum with our children until they will grow up. And they do, somewhere in the late 30s. It's not a long time to wait. It's not a long time to wait. It's really downhill after that. After about, when they hit 40, it's so much easier to parent them. We have to be realistic, mature about it, and be patient about it. We have to be honest and tuned in to where are they holding. There's an amazing, I'll leave you the last thought on this. There's amazing Rabbeinu Shimshon Hirsch. It's kedai, if you can get hold of the Hirsch Chumash in English, it's such a joy to read. If you like English, reading like classy English, it's just a joy to read. So he questions this. He says, the Pasuk says in Bereshis, that Kadosh Baruch Hu destroyed the world by the Mabul, ki rak lev adam rak ra kol hayoim. Because the person's rak ra kol hayoim. And then after the Mabul, he says, I'm never going to destroy the world again, ki rak ra min urav. So make up your mind, says Rav Hirsch. You destroyed the world, ki rak ra kol hayoim. And now you're not destroying the world, ki rak ra min urav. Like, we're ra or not ra? You're destroying or not destroying? So Rabbeinu Hirsch has the most beautiful, profound insight that's so crucial to every one of us. He says like this. He says, what is a nar? Nar is a teenager, right? Right? The I guess in the modern Hebrew slang, the tipacious, right? The nar, right? It's the nar. He says, this word nar, what does it mean, a nar? So he says, he equates or connects it to the word lena'er. Lena'er means to shake off, like shake a sheet, right? You'd shake it off. That's lena'er, right? So Zogdav Hirsch, I'm going to explain it a little more than, he says it, but I'll explain it. When a child is small, you have a baby, so you're in charge. A baby has no clue how to do anything. So you're in charge. You set the pace for feeding and changing and whatever it is. And you tune in to the cries and whatever else it is, and you respond. But you're in charge. You're kaveya. You decide what clothes the baby wears. Even a small child, as they grow up, mommy goes to buy the clothing, right? And you dress them, and you decide when bedtime is and bath time is. Basically, it's a dictatorship. Right? You're the dictator and you're in charge. That's the way it should be, because the child doesn't know how to do it themselves. So a child relies on healthy, mature parents to dictate their life. Halavai, by the time they're 18, 19, 20 and they leave home and get married, halavai, they will be self-determining. They'll have matriculated and they will decide and make basically all decisions for themselves. Of course, what's negate to you, you have power of veto. But nevertheless, you don't want to be buying their clothes when they're 19, 20. You don't want to make choices for them at that age. You want them to do it themselves. And you hope that you've taught them how to do it. This transition from dictatorship to what's essentially more or less a democracy, where they have a right and a say in their own lives, of course with a certain veto from a parent, but basically they're independent, people. How does that happen? Zogdav Hirsch, the children are lena'er, they shake us off. That's a nar. A nar is up and down. You know what teenagers are like. Every 2 minutes, look at any two girls. 1 minute they're best friends, the next minute they hate each other and they're crying their head off. And the worst thing to do is get involved, because the next day they're best friends again. So you dare not say a word. It's a whole volatility with the hormones and life and growth and development. They're like 2-year-olds in a big body, right? They're just totally nuts, going through their up and down craziness. That process is called narus. And says Rav Hirsch that Hashem is saying to the world, if your rebellion would be rak ra kol hayom, I'll destroy you. But if your rebellion is rak ra min urav, you're immature. Talking to adults. You're immature, you're not developed. You're working on your dveikus, you're working on your yadus. But your rebellion is not because you're doing to rebel against me. You're just not developed. That'll never destroy the world. Narus is a natural process. See, wise parents hold the other end of the sheet. So they hold one end, you hold the other, and you shake together. In other words, we shake ourselves off. We allow ourselves to be shaken off. And we do it as a collaborative process. And then our kids can grow up without being dried out. We have to see their self-determination as part of their maturity, as part of their development, and guide them. I don't mind. You want to make a mistake, make a mistake. I'm sure you think you're right. And if I'm right and you're wrong, you'll learn from it. I'd rather you learn from the experience than you hate me while I strangle you to do what I decide is right. So yes, I'll tell you what I think is right. I'm not shy. I'll tell you what I think is right and wrong, but I will give it over to you to decide what you're actually going to do. I'm not going to force you. And you see right away they get like scared, They're kind of used to us forcing them. Because we've got to shift the process over to them. So the second thing, if we're going to get through these Yomim Narayim, this Tkufa, well, with all the stress involved, is to be honest about our children. They're a work in progress. Do not expect them to be big tzaddikim and so for dveikus. And even if you remember you were in your early years, you remember you were and you were turned. What's that got to do with them? Everyone has different personalities. They're different. We're all born with different, like we said from the Gemara Nida, midas and personality. There's no shaykhus what I was to them. So that's the second thing. Have realistic understanding of your children. Allow them to be children. Allow them to grow up. It's not all about this yontif. It's about their whole life. What they miss now, they get next year, they get the year after. Don't worry about it. It's not so crucial and terrifying. They'll miss tekiyas, and we learn the chazals and we're terrified. Does he really hear all the tekiyas? You can't become we're all suddenly briskers, when it comes to tekiyas and terrified for our children. Allow them to be children. So now I'd like to talk about some practical advice. Practical advice. And we're talking now about, based on what I've said till now, about our challenging children. The ones who are challenging and they're not exactly, doing what we would like them to do. So we have to talk to them. We have to create realistic expectations for them and us. We talk to them. If you've got kids who you know very well they can't sit through a Suda, so why make them? How about, instead of the tension, will they, won't they, and this whole background struggle of trying to get them to sit through the Suda, how about we just go and talk to them before Yontif and say to them, I know it's hard for you. Can we work on this together? What could we do to make the Sudas more comfortable to you? How can we do? Is there anything that you would like better the Suda? Because sof kosof, I'm in. I already got the Messiah. I'm already doing what I'm meant to do. I want to help them do it. So the number one eitzah which we seem to mess up in is go talk to them before Yontif. Don't wait till there's a crisis or a problem. Discuss with them well in advance about Yontif, about attendance at shul, and about sitting at the meals and what's realistic expectations for you, and how can we make it easier for you. Talk to them about Chol HaMoed long before. You don't talk about Chol HaMoed the night after Motzi Yontif, when everyone's tense like anything about what we're going to do. We should be discussing it already. What would you like to do, Chol HaMoed? Let's talk about it and plan in advance things that make sense for them and make sense for us, that it can all work together. And we should be going out of our way to work out, how can I make this a meaningful experience for you? That's my goal. If a child isn't there, you say to her, it's not like, you're angry they're not at the Suda. I miss you, Shefala. I enjoy your company. What could I do to make it easier for you to be there? The kid doesn't want to dress exactly so frum and yeshivish at the table. We can make a whole chorban of life by demanding they have to dress exactly Shabbos-dik and otherwise you can't come to the meal. Where is this saying Torah like this? It's just merachik the children. You're just sending them away. We have to allow them to go through the process of naras, the ups and downs of childishness. They have to be childish. And we have to talk to them and connect with them and reach out to them. We have to discuss with them things like going to shul, getting up in the morning. We sit down with them and discuss what's realistic. How much time, minimally, do we really expect them to sit? Really? We want them to sit 3-4 hours? It's madness. Shul shouldn't be a place for babysitting. We don't babysit in shul. It doesn't make any sense. Nor do we want to demand of our children, the whole way you have to be there through davening. Tell them in advance what makes sense for you. Give them information based on their age and their struggles. What is a realistic expectation? Tell them go home. Don't sit here if you're miserable. Go home. Go read a book. But don't sit here being miserable. You're going to hate Yadus. You're going to hate being frum. You're going to hate davening. Don't do it. Go home. There's a minimal needs for davening. I remember with some of our children who had their own struggles and issues, I would take a siddur and a yellow highlighter when they were little and started coming to shul and just highlight a couple of pieces and say, just look for the yellow at the beginning and the end. That's all you have to do. Don't worry about the rest. And over the years, you add a few more pieces. But you create very realistic expectations with them about their attendance in shul and how long you should be there. Talk to them about it. And don't demand their work in progress. They don't have to be there the whole time. It doesn't make any sense. Give them the minimum. Surprise them by, instead of pushing them to expand themselves how much longer, push them for what's the minimal. Could you cope with this? Do you need less? Would that be good for you? Help tune into them so that they can feel understood and they'll produce more. They'll want to do it. Give them too much, and usually too much is less, because then they rebel because they can't handle it. Give them the minimum possible. But talk to them about teens. I'll give you another one. Teens, I hear this all the time about the teens suddenly decide they don't want to go shul. Look, everyone enjoys their kids sitting next to them in shul. Everyone enjoys that. Well, if they're dressed properly, I guess, we really enjoy it. But you know what I'm saying? But ideally, we would love our kids to be dressed appropriately, and there's always some kid, usually a neighbor has some little tzaddik or tzaddikus. They're 5 years old, and they're there at the beginning of davening, shuckling the whole way through, davening out loud, and everyone else eats their hearts out, because there's one. He just came back like that. That's the way they came back. I'll have a different nisoyon. This is not their nisoyon. But we have to be realistic. If they don't want to sit with you, don't. I recommend don't. If they want to go to a different shul, tell them to go. Teenagers, they don't like being around their fathers prickly. It's like, they're going to get the evil eye from their parent if they don't look. They don't want to be around their parents. Go daven somewhere else. It's fine. You want to daven somewhere else? I have no problem. I'll be happy if you come with me. I'll be thrilled. You want your kids to be with you? Never, ever nudge them in davening. Never point out the place. Never knew them. No. Just leave them alone. Be a role model of what davening is meant to look like. Be a role model. Let them observe someone davening. Same with benching. You know what benching looks like in most homes? We start benching. No. Like, benching is a weird thing in most homes. It's like a strange ritual. I never saw those news in the middle of my benching. It's so much more effective to simply bench like a mensch. Just do it. Do the real thing. Just do a dveikus benching and let the kids observe that. And do a dveikus tefillah. Don't know them. You want your kids to be with you, don't know them. Don't demand of them nothing. They can sit there, and if they sit there bored, when you can, you say, go home, Schäferle, go read, come back later. Come back later, it's fine. Or don't come back later. Whatever's good for you. It's good for me. You have to have minimal expectations. Tune into them and be a role model. They're much more likely to want to be with you and sure. But don't nudge them, whatever you do. It's Yatzaschar Befsedo. You think you've done something good, you haven't. You distance them. What are you trying to do? Get them to daven. Why? To be close to God. And what did you do? Drove them away from Him. Think about it. It's mad. It's Pashup mad. And we all know that's true. What's in the way? Ego. We know that. That's a different drasha. So give them the minimums, look away, and don't new them like crazy. And allow them to be there. And when you come home, and you find, we had one of our kids, I think for years, how many, 3 years? I wake him up Shabbos morning, Shabbos time, I'm going to shul now, see you in shul. Yeah, I'll see you in shul. Nechtigatog, never came to shul. I come home from shul, never turned up, sitting there drinking coffee, schmoozing. And you don't say, did you wash Negavasa? Did you daven? Did you put on sitters? You say, good Shabbos, Schäferle, and you give him a big hug. And you ignore the whole thing. And you act like a person who is verdvekust. You are. You are connected, and they watch that, and they admire that, and eventually they can become that. It's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed. But it's much more likely than if you think you're newing your kids into dvekas. You're not. You're not. The meals can be a nightmare for some kids. For some fathers, this is their moment when they always fancied they should have been Mashgiach and Ponovich and didn't quite make it. They don't know why. But this is my opportunity to prove I could have been. And they start with the ganze drasha. It's a miracle they don't stand up with the stender, the whole thing. It doesn't make any sense. First of all, most of this stuff, it's like the brain turns off the moment you start. The moment you start talking, the brain, there's unbelievable, listen to this. See, what we do, we changed our system years ago for our kids to the power of the SMV. The power of the SMV. The SMV is the short, meaningful vort. Ideally 2 minutes, right? Is that the 2-minute rule? 2 minutes or less, ideally. It takes, by the way, much more work to prepare a 2-minute vort than it does to give a drasha. 2-minute meaning, listen to this research. You won't believe this, but this is a fact. You can find this, I'll quote it, so you can find this online. This is a research done on first-year undergraduate chemistry students. By the way, I don't think anyone signs up for chemistry unless you want to. There's no such thing as a prereq. You have to do chemistry, right? If you want to do chemistry, you do it. If you don't, you don't. So anyone first-year undergraduate chemistry student is a student in college who chose to do chemistry, right? This study was done on these students. It was done by Bunce, Flens, and Niels in 2010. The study's title was How Long Can Students Pay Attention in Class? A Study of Student Attention Decline, the Journal of Chemical Education, Volume 87, page 1438 to 1443. You can look it up. And this is what it quotes in this study, this research. You won't believe this. The researchers observed that the most frequent reported length of attention lapse was 1 minute or less, suggesting that very short breaks in attention are more common than longer breaks. And it then continues to say, the researchers observed a pattern in which the first spike in reported attention lapses occurred just 30 seconds into a lecture segment. Now, these are undergraduate students, got all the way through school, chose to go to college, chose chemistry, and nevertheless, The first lapse in attention in the middle of a drasha, a lecture, was 30 seconds. And the average was 1 minute. Who are we fooling? I told you, if you want to get your kids to go to sleep early, just say a drasha. Just put pillows instead of their soup bowl on the table and say a drasha, and then we'll go to sleep. It's marvelous. It'll knock them all out. The SMV. We have to shift to a short, meaningful vort. Something that will capture the attention and be interesting and then stop. If that doesn't work, and sometimes even that's too much, even a 2-minute vort is too much, it's best just to talk, have conversation with the kids, and leave it alone. You could just watch the eyes dropping. As it's so easy to gauge. Everyone's like, you see this movement. It's very interesting, involuntary movement there. And stop the drasha. Shmooze, stories. Stories are the best. It's unbelievable. You say a story, everyone's awake. They love stories. So, there's laws out with the drashas and lomdas. I mean, with all due respect to, I don't want to mention the names of certain achronim, but they don't belong in our Shabbos table. I don't want to mention the names. It's like, but they poshet don't belong. They're instant, like, head nods. You're gone. If you're going to say anything, it's got to be uplifting. It's got to be meaningful. It's got to be geschmack. Preferably a story is best. Just drop the rest. Doesn't make any sense. Try and engage the children in conversation. But let's let go of this. We're going to use this ma'amad here to get all the hashkafas haTorah that my kids are lacking. We're going to lace it into them tonight. Captive audience here. We're going to get it into them. I'll tell you another one, by the way. Making Kiddush. I observed one of my Yedidim. It was mamish mispoil one time. We were there for Shabbos by a good friend of mine. He had 2 kids at that time, little ones, like ADD type kids. They're probably about, 5, 6, 7 years old, something like that. And he's making Kiddush, standing there, a whole nice Kiddush going on there. And these kids are running around the table, chasing each other as he's making his Dveikas Digga Kiddush. And lo and behold, I watched it with my own eyes. One of them smashed into his arm, spilt half the Kiddush on the table, on his clothes, shoes, and chair. And I saw the most incredible thing. I wish I would be zoicha to live like that. Because I watched with my own eyes as he laughed, looked at his wife, they both giggled, took her thing, filled up the thing, and continued making Kiddush. And these 2 boys have been tired today, steigen away. And that's why. That's the whole that I'm trying to explain to you. It's kedai that it happens so you can watch your father burst out laughing. I want to tell you, the one Pesach, when we had our first grandson, one Pesach, the first time we had an einikul at the table. It's a special experience. You see the Messiah, the families, another generation. It was amazing. Kids in a high chair. And it's like, wow, we got a kid at a Pesach Seder. It's like, it's a geschmacka feeling. And we're about to make Kiddush. Before Kiddush, the whole table was laid. It was beautiful, bedecked and everything. And very joyous. All the kids were there. And the married couple with the einikul. It was like, it's like very geschmacka experience. And as I'm about to make Kiddush, we don't know how it happened. This kid grabs a glass out of somewhere and threw it onto the table, smashing glasses and stuff and crashing in the whole table. And everyone burst out laughing, me too. We all thought it was hilarious. And then the whole Seder stopped. I'm holding the Kiddush, we put it down, we cleaned it down. And everyone was laughing about it. And then, cleaned up, and then we moved him a bit away from the table. And then we made Kiddush, went by. That night, I did not sleep. I had a very painful, emotionally disturbing sleep that night. And the reason it was so hard for me was because I wondered what on earth took me so long to have a grandchild to chap that you're meant to laugh when they do this stuff. Where was I with my kids when they were young? What took me so long to realize you're meant to laugh when they crash into you, when they smash the glass? They're kids. And what they observe in your response and reaction when you laugh about it all. Imagine if they take your esrog and drop it and smash the pitum and you laugh. You've given them more Messiah than you could ever give them. I don't care how many times you shake that lull of an esrog. That laughter, that story, that Tati just laughed, and we had to go and borrow an esrog from the neighbor. That story puts more ruchnius into your children than you could ever possibly do with your esrog. And why do we miss all this? It's pelagic that we don't see it. It's just Pasha Mavel that we don't see it. But when we see it, am I right? It's like, boom, the light goes on. It's so profound. It's almost like I want them to do it. I want them to define me. Because I can show you I'm going to love you more. And that's going to connect you to the Messiah. And if you can't do a story, and you can't do anything ruchni, and we had one year at our table, Rosh Hashanah, it was such a Musa Haskel to me. It was amazing, amazing thing. One Rosh Hashanah by night, first night, we had a bunch of boys from, should we say, struggling type yeshivas. Is that probably a reasonable statement? Struggling type yeshivas. A bunch of boys at the table. These are the guys, if you mention just the word Dvar Torah, everyone's like, there's a Dvar. Anyway, the meal went great, and we schmoozed, and we sang even, and we had a great meal. And it came to the end, and I teased them. I said, guys, it was a setup, because I prepared for this. I said, guys, but I didn't know what was going to happen. The truth is, I did not know what was going to happen. I said, guys, I hope you don't mind, but I'm from Lakewood, we're going to have a Dvar Torah. And they're like, shoo. The looks on their faces, it looked like someone just shot them. They were like, just wrecked my whole meal. I thought we were having a nice time here. They told me you were chilled. I wouldn't have come here otherwise. And I said, guys, it's going to be good, you'll see. This is not going to be a Dvar Torah like you ever heard before. Yeah, and I'm getting their interest. I built it up a little bit. You'll see, this is going to be a Dvar Torah you guys are going to enjoy like amazing. And they're looking at each other, all right, let's try them out, let's see, we'll see. And I said, you got to listen carefully because it's going to be over in 10 seconds. 10 seconds, great, high-fiving each other, 10 seconds, we can do that. Okay, we're in 10 seconds of our Torah, Rosh Hashanah by night, we can handle that, But I said, listen carefully because it's going to be finished before you hear it. And I said to them, nobody can go back and create a new beginning. But everyone can start today and create a new ending. That's it. These guys erupted. I'm not kidding, high-fiving, cheering. They said it's the best Dvar Torah they ever heard in their lives. This is, wow, I wish I'd heard Dvar Torah like this. This is a Dvar Torah. This is the real deal. And the conversation then they got into with me for, I don't know how long it went. It went for ages, this incredible conversation about the whole idea that no one can go back and create a new beginning. What was, let it go. But everyone can start today and create a new ending. And they were so pumped and excited about it. Sometimes just an inspirational saying, well prepared, well timed, and well delivered, is worth more than all the possible divrei Torah you could bring with all the lamdas and the stories and everything else, because it reaches them and it's relevant to them and it lifts them. We're in two, and I'm fulfilling my job, which is Dav Kabod, connecting to God. So it all comes together by me understanding what's my true role in Yontif, which is to connect to God. Understanding that my way of connecting my children is through my relationship with them, through my love and my kindness, and that comes better when they defy me than when they comply. and making it relevant to them. Talk to them. Tune into them. Tune into their needs. Make Yontif. I've already got Yontif. I'm already from Jew. I'm doing just fine. Thank you very much. I mean, more or less, needs some improvement, versteht sich. But relatively, I'm doing okay. They're the ones who need it. They're the ones I should make it relevant to them. Tune into them. Do the mahurachum, afatarachum. Be a role model of a person they would want to be when they grow up. You will have connected them to Ribono Shel Olam. This is what Hashem wants of us through this Yontif experience. So they help if we could just grasp it, understand it, internalize it, and live it, I believe we can have the most amazing, uplifting Yontif. That Mitzvah Hashem will bring us all close to Ribono Shel Olam, and we should all have a ksiva, v'chsima toiva, a good gebencht yor, and we should enjoy it. Oh, one last thing, I'm sorry. And here's it's unbelievable, how could I forget it? What's the most important thing that we have to remember? If none of the rest of this drasha you remember, but this you got to remember. Smile. Can you smile? Can you just smile at your kids? Can we not walk into the house seeing them dressed this way or that way, or like they did come, they didn't come, they did come to davening, they did hither together, and we walk in like miserable. I mean, come on, let's grow up. Give them a smile. Walk in and show them you love them. It doesn't matter. Because that loving smile, dafka, when whatever they've been doing wasn't exactly with the program, that loving smile, that's the Baba V'Rov. That's the smile that says, I see you. I want you to be the Chazan. You, Mechal Shabbos, you're not Mechal Shabbos. I want you in my base of Medrash. I want you to be the Chazan. Imagine if we could be like the Rav was, and we could smile at our children and show them, I see through all the external traumas and struggles, all the package, all your problems, I see through it all. I see you. And that's something worth smiling about. That makes me smile when I see you. Gift your children your smile. Make them see that you love them. And with that, we'll have taka, an emistik, a yontiv, a true ksiva, chesima, taiva, a good gebench. Thank you so much for coming out.